Good morning, everyone. This is David McKay with BlackBoxStocks, and we are here for the next webinar in the Meet the Mod series. This morning we have ThuyKang joining us, which we're really excited about that. ThuyKang, are you there?
Hey, good morning, everybody. Good morning.
Good morning, man. So we are going to listen to what ThuyKang does in his daily routine as he gets ready for trading. What he's looking at with terms of news, with the tools in the system. Is he looking at the pre-market scanner, the top gainers charts, watching CNBC? We've got a lot of buzz going on about Tesla this morning, and it's already doing some interesting volume this morning. So we're going to talk about that and then listen to ThuyKang take us through his daily prep routine and then into the open, and then after the open, what he's looking at and why. So, ThuyKang, I'm gonna let you take it, man. Why don't you go ahead and tell us what your pre-prep routine is for the open?
Sounds good. Thank you, D-Mac. So, welcome everybody. Glad that everybody could join us this morning. So, start off by just saying real quick, this is nobody told me to say this, but hey, I love BlackBox. I wouldn't be at the level that, I'm still learning every day, but I wouldn't be here without it. Not only with the and I'm sure we'll get more into this as we go along, but not only with the platform, but also with the community. But what I'm looking at so kind of what I do before I get started in the morning, before the market opens, I do look at the platform, and I just dragged it over to my main screen here. I am looking at the pre-market scanner to see if there's anything that kind of just jumps out at me. Now, primarily I'm trading, only a handful of stocks, and usually that's Amazon, Tesla. Lately, I've kind of looked at Beyond, and then I'll look at Apple as well. And there may be one that I'm forgetting, but primarily, and everybody who's known me from the room knows that most of the time, like 85 to 90% of the time, I'm looking at Amazon. I just find it simpler for me to look at that one. But I still look at the pre-market scanner because, again, I want to see what's moving in the morning and kind of see where we are. And like for right now, I'd be looking at UVXY to see that, we're up a little north of 5% on that, because that'll help me, in terms of I look at UVXY during the day, especially with Amazon, to kind of see how she's going. Also in the morning, one of the first things that I do, even before I get into the office and kind of set everything up, is I have this on my phone, the CNBC app. And so I'm looking at CNBC. Apple News is good as well, because I have it set up to separate everything out by ticker. So there's a section for Tesla, there's a section for Amazon, and I have a section on there as well for Apple. And so it kind of puts everything in one little neat box for me. When I'm still laying in the bed, I'm up around 5:30 in the morning, and I'm reading news on all of these different things. Also on my phone, I'm looking at investing.com. So I want to see the indices. I'm looking at futures. I look at this, like, once the trading day is over, I'll take a look at futures to kind of get a good idea of where we are once they open up in the evening. But I really don't pay them too much attention in the evening, because I don't necessarily trade futures overnight. I just like to get a good idea of where we are and kind of what Asia is doing, how that's impacting us, and things like that. So I look at this from the previous night on, and then once I wake up again in the morning, I'll watch this to kind of see how things are doing and kind of see where we're going in the market, and kind of see, that kind of gives me a good idea of where our open might look like. So once I've taken a look at, I've read the news on my phone and kind of went through those things to kind of get up to date on what's going on with each one of the stocks that I look at in the overall market. Again, I'll take a look at the futures. Then when I get into the office, I like to open up my email And what I do is I have Google Alerts set up for each one of those tickers as well. So I'll pull up each one of these, and I've already went through these this morning, but like, for instance, BABA, and that was the one that I forgot. BABA, I'll take a look here at BABA to see, what news stories are kind of coming along today, and if there's anything that I missed, from CNBC or any of the other news areas that I look at. And this just kind of gives me a good idea. I'll kind of scan through these, and it just kind of gives me a good idea of what's going on, with each one of those. If there's anything that I missed, and it just kind of gives me a good idea of what's going on with each one of these. So I have this set up for each one of the tickers that I follow. And this, again, I have it set to send this to me around 8 o'clock in the morning every morning. One of the other, I know that I kind of covered this when I look at my phone to look at news. CNBC is one area that I follow. Another good news source that I like is Business Insider. I just had this pulled up because, again, it's just something that I look at my phone, so I'm not necessarily reading this, again, when I get into the office on my desktop. But Business Insider is a good one that I like, and then also Bloomberg. So I look at those two along with CNBC, and then, like I said, along with Apple News and things like that. I have pretty well been able to keep my bases covered. So usually those are, in terms of the morning, those are the things that I will look at. Also, here, one thing that I'm just forgetting real quick is I want to see if there's anything that could potentially move markets throughout the day. So I'll take a look here over at investing.com. It's the same place that I went to look at futures, but I'll go here and look at the economic calendar for today. And, of course, and it covers everything that could be happening overnight. But then also I come down here to look and see, we had jobless claims this morning. So that was important. And then, of course, it lets us know if we have anything, like we'll have manufacturing PMI, services PMI, and different things like that, new home sales. So these are things that you can come through and look at bill auctions. Also, a good thing that's in here is, right here, like it lets us know that at 1 o'clock today, the Federal Reserve member, the FOMC, or Federal Open Markets Committee members are going to be speaking at different times. So you can even click here and listen to them. Sometimes it will have, the links where you can actually listen to them if you want to do that during the day. But again, this is a really good site, and I like to look and see here what could happen during the day that could potentially either move markets, have an impact on what I'm trading, or, as we can see sometimes with FOMC speakers or minutes releases, you might get a stall for a couple hours, or things might kind of go flat. So that kind of lets me know, especially with options, you kind of want to be aware of those areas because, you got that theta burn, especially if you're trading weekly options. So that's kind of a brief overview of what I do to get an idea of the sentiment for the day. And I found that as I've been trading, getting an idea for that sentiment and kind of taking the temperature of the market, that's key. Because again, you want to kind of get the feeling of, are we going to, pop on some good news, and are we going to have a pretty good day to the upside? You can also have the same thing to the downside, or, with features and, kind of some of the other economic data, is it just like we're going to, be flat? So that's kind of a good thing that I do to kind of put all these things to kind of get a good picture of what the sentiment may look like for that day. And so that's kind of my pre-market routine. That's what I'll look at. And then, outside of, once I have all of my news, I'll move on over to my tickers, and I trade in TradingView, but I'll move over to my tickers and kind of look at each one and see how we're doing for the morning. So again, I primarily look at Amazon. So I'll pull up this is an hour. So once it loads, I'll go down to the minute. but I will go down to the minute, and I like to see what the pre-market action is looking, how it's looking for the day. Sorry, it's just a little bit of a lag.
No, that's all right, man. Go ahead. We're good.
Cool. Thank you.
So how many screens do you have going at once, ThuyKang?
No problem. So I have three. So I have one that I keep Discord on, and then I keep like my real-time options tickers on. I have one here that you're seeing, which is my main screen, of course, for my news, and then email, and of course, looking at my charts. And then I have a third screen where I keep the BlackBox platform, and then I keep a couple of other longer-term charts that I kind of flip through during the day.
Cool.
Yeah, and now I trade I've got a lot of questions in the past on, am I trading through a platform or am I trading, through like on mobile? Because I know like some people have expressed, preferences for either or. For me, what works best, I trade off mobile. So I don't trade, I have an iPad here with me on my desk, and that's what I use to execute my orders. So pretty much, I don't like trading through the platform on my computer because it takes there's a few extra steps to do it through Narrow Edge, and then also mobile just seems to, mobile has been a little bit faster as far as execution. So I always go through my iPad when I'm executing those orders.
Sure, I'm the same way. I trade with my phone in my hand, and just finger on the button. Those native mobile apps those brokerages have are, I think, a lot more efficient and effective, in my opinion. And there's just a lot less problems. So
I agree. And then, of course, it's always good to. I found it good to, get really familiar with trading on mobile too, because you never know. Even though, like, you can always try to plan for different redundancies, but if you have a power outage, or if your internet goes down or whatever, you always have that mobile connection. So I just always found that to be more reliable as well.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so just to kind of on the tail end of my pre-market routine, what I'm doing is once I kind of get a good feel for the market, I've looked at news, I've looked at my updates on my tickers. I've went and looked at BlackBox and looked at pre-market activity. I'll come over here to TradingView, and that's when I look at each one of my tickers, and I'll kind of see how everything is going. Now, I've already looked at these in terms of how we're moving, dollar value wise. I'll go and look at this already, like, when I'm, before I even get down to the office. Because I want to see, are we popping? Are we dropping? What's going on? Are we flat? But then when I get to down here, I like to see the actual price action. And so before I get started, before we open up the market, then I'll come down here and look through each one and kind of see, how are we doing? Again, what areas of support and resistance are we hitting on in pre-market? Excuse me, this area here. What TradingView will do is it'll shape this gold area here is pre-market, or aftermarket, and then it's pre-market. So I like that because I like to see, sometimes you can catch some really good, chart setups for the open. And so what I like to do is I like to come down here and see what the price action is looking like before we get started in the morning. So I can see if there's anything that I need to be aware of right at market open, or if there's any kind of pattern that I could be aware of, as we're getting started to trade. Also, a lot of folks have asked me, do you hop in right at the open, or do you give it a moment to kind of open up? And for me, I don't necessarily have a set rule. So for me, I will just kind of, if I see a setup that I really like, for instance, if we're setting on an area, a really strong area of support or resistance, then, and I like how we're holding, or if I see that we're in a really nice chart pattern, then I might, I might give it maybe a minute or two to open and hop right in, just based on kind of how we're looking. But I don't necessarily have a set rule on that. So that's kind of everything, that I'll look at, pre-market before we get started in the morning.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm kind of the same way, man. Just to touch on that point you just made, I generally don't trade in the first few minutes, but if I do see something like we did yesterday morning, then, maybe I will pop it real quick. But, I'm normally, zoned in to whatever I'm in that first 5 to 10 minutes, just in case things do change drastically, which they've been known to do, especially now with, what's going on with trade wars and things. So you just have to, be aware in that first 10 minutes of the market, 15 minutes, sometimes it goes a little bit more, into the day with, 20, 30 minutes. So it's just, being, aware and, in focus during that time frame is a necessity. Go ahead, man.
Most definitely. No, you're fine. And I was going to say, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that as I've gotten farther along in trading, having that restraint not to, again, if it's a chart pattern that looks awesome and, price action, if all the stars are aligned, I'm by no means am I saying that, I wouldn't encourage anybody to jump in. But at the same time, if you're a little shaky, if it kind of looks like, it could go either way, I've had people DM me and be like, well, I jumped in and I thought it was going to do this. But, as I've learned over time, there's nothing wrong with, if you're not sure, just sit back and as a lot of people have said in the room, just let the chart develop. And, I agree with you 100%. Sometimes, it might take a couple of minutes to be really sure of what you're going to do. Sometimes it might take, 30, 45 minutes to an hour. And then sometimes there's been days where I haven't made a trade all day if the chart doesn't really set up. But that kind of goes back to just having that patience and letting the chart set up.
Absolutely. And so we're open today. Opening bell just happened. So let's see what you're looking at on Amazon here. I'm really interested in this because I know how much you watch Amazon, you trade it, you know it so well. What do you see right now?
Cool. Yeah. So here, really, she's looking flat right now. It looks like here that we're under an area of, resistance, which is about 1840.5. So primarily, I'll trade off the 1 minute. I make all of my decisions in terms of entries and exits off the 1 minute. But what I like to do when I have some time, and what I mean by that is when things are flat and we're not necessarily moving strongly in one direction or the other, I like to come out to the 1 hour and I'll take a look and see where we are in terms of, and forgive me, I know this is going to look crazy because I draw my charts a lot, but I'll come out to the 1 hour and I'll see where we are, in terms of what the setup looks like. So right here, as you can see, if it's a longer term pattern, I'll put these, it's just my style, I'll put these polka dot lines on here. And that kind of lets me know that that's a longer trend and that's not necessarily something intraday, but it is a longer trend for me to watch out for. So as you can see here, going back to the 13th, it looks like we've been in a, just kind of a wedge pattern, an ascending wedge, or I guess some people might call this like a bull, or a bear flag. So basically, we've just been consolidating, and especially over the last few trading sessions here, we've just been tightening up. So that would have been something that I was keeping an eye on here to see if we were going to reverse course, and take a move to the upside, or if we were going to continue the pattern, validate the pattern, and basically fall out to the bottom. And as you can see here in pre-market, that's exactly what we've done. And again, I'm sure I don't know when you want to get into indicators. If you want me to talk about that now.
Anytime, man. You're driving, so let's roll.
Cool.
Wherever you want to go.
Cool. Uh, so as you can see here, that on all of my charts here that you'll see today, this yellow line right here, this is the 34 EMA. And so that's one of the things that I like. I love looking at it on my chart to use as an area, especially when I'm scalping for support and resistance. This kind of purplish line here, magenta, I guess you would call it, that is the 21. That is just a simple moving average. This teal line here is a 8, just a simple moving average. And then when I switch over to intraday, I have an orange line, and you can probably see it here, but it's really just only for intraday use, is the VWAP that, you hear a lot of people talking about. So those are kind of what I use to look at for, in addition to, support and resistance areas that I've mapped out here on my chart. Those are kind of other areas that you can use, or that I use to identify like trend reversals, and things, especially when I'm scalping. That kind of gives me the conviction to either get in or get out of a trade. And so kind of going back to the chart here, what I'll do is, and I'm sorry, these below here, this is a TTM squeeze. And that might help. I'll just unmask this here. Let's see here. So let me unmask. Sorry, I had a visit from my 2.5-year-old.
All good, man.
Yeah. So I have a 21 MA, 8 MA, of course, volume. I also look at the 200 MA. That gives me an idea kind of where we are for a longer term in terms of, an area of trend reversal. And then, of course, I look at VWAP and the 34 EMA. Now, in TradingView, they have some kind of proprietary strategies that they have. There's a price channel strategy, and that kind of, as we look at my chart, you'll see like blue areas telling, that's when the chart is saying, okay, this is a good area to get in, and the red will be a good area to enter a short position. But I don't necessarily trade 100% off of just the price channel strategy. I like to have it there, kind of as confirmation, and it kind of keeps me sane, so to speak, when I'm in the trade, or I'm trying to ride the trade in terms of knowing when to get in or get out. And then also I have high and low pivots, and again, what that's doing is that's just highlighting the when a price has turned, the highest and lowest price targets within like 7 candles. So those are things that I'm looking at. These lower indicators, TTM squeeze, and then of course I have MACD, and I have mine set to a little bit of a faster setting. Maria, I got to give her the credit for this one. She, told me about the faster setting, so I like that when I'm scalping, and so I use 585. But just kind of going back to the chart, let's see here. So I like to look at I don't trade off of 1 hour, but I do like to look here at the 1 hour chart, because it gives me takes me out to, the 10,000 feet level, and lets me know, hey, what's going on in terms of, are we, what's the trend? And so that kind of gives me a temperature of the price movement. And so here, of course, coming out to the hour, I can see that over the last, few trading sessions that we've just been consolidating. So here, going to day before yesterday, this would have been an excellent, for me, a low risk area to short at the open, because I see that we've kind of been bouncing along, for a little while. We've kind of been bouncing along this line, and this goes all the way back to, let's see here. This goes all the way back to around the 3rd. So that would have been a low risk entry, and I would have just put in a stop. If we would have broken over that line, I would have put in a stop right just a little north of that, maybe a couple of dollars above that. But it would have been a low risk area for me to short. And then likewise, to get out of the short when she bounces along the bottom end of this channel. And so I'll go out to and I do this on all of my tickers. I'll go out to the longer term, and then what I'll do is I'll start going down through different time frames. So I'll come down to like 15 minutes and take a look and see here where we are. And I know this is taking a little bit longer, but for me, I'm just kind of going through these in pretty quick succession down through the time frames to see what the trend is. Because sometimes you can have an overall trend that is going one way on a longer time frame. And then sometimes when you come down to, you know, a little bit shorter time frames, you know, you might get an equally as an opposite trend because of course we can have bounces within longer time frames and things of that nature. So I just like to make myself familiar with where we are kind of in that whole process. So usually I hit 1 hour, I hit 15 minutes, I hit 5. And once I kind of go down through those, and, you know, I can see here that Amazon has just been in this kind of hitting its head up around this 1840 half area. And as you can see there, we've rejected off of the 34 this morning. We can't get above it. So I'll then come back down to the 1 minute.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Are you preset those levels of support and resistance? Or is it
correct?
Okay.
Correct. So, and I'm glad that you brought that up, D-Mac. So that is something I also get a question about anytime if I share my chart. People ask, you know, hey, does TradingView have, and it, you know, does it pre-populate all of your areas of support and resistance? Because I'll give those out in the morning. And no, it doesn't. What I do is I go through, and when I first started out, what I would do is I would go back out to like the daily and mark up my areas of support and resistance, and then of course go down, and I would just go down through each time frame, not every single one, but usually daily. Then I go to like 4 hour, then I go to 1 hour, and so on and so forth. And I go down and I'll look at major and minor areas of support. And, you know, usually kind of one of the things that I always look at too, the longer that area of support or resistance goes back, then the stronger it will be. So I try to pay attention to kind of longer term support and resistance. And then of course, during the day, what I'll look at is like, I'll go over here, like in the pre-market and look at my pivots, and I'll see, okay, where were we as far as our pre-market high and pre-market low? Most of the time I'll go in and draw those out so that I kind of have a visual, but if I'm in a hurry, I'll just keep an eye on the pivots, you know, up through here. But like when I'll draw, I'll just put this out here. And that polka dot is for my long term, so let me adjust that back down to regular. So that's my pre-market low. And then I'll come up here to the pre-market high. And I'll do the same thing. TradingView just a little delayed. I guess it's GoToWebinar. All right. So I have those on because that sometimes when we break a pre-market low, or if we break a pre-market high to the upside or downside, of course, we can get some more continuation. Other times, you know, we might just be bouncing around, you know, between these areas of support and resistance. And then, of course, that can also intraday, especially if you're scalping, that can act as an area of support and resistance as well. So I just like to have these on my chart to kind of give me an idea of, you know, where we are in terms of price action.
Is that when you sometimes say, you know, I'm looking for some range or some a channel to form?
Yeah, so definitely range, because sometimes Amazon, especially what, you know, the last few days have been all right, but sometimes what we'll do is we'll just get it to where she chops around, and she can chop around between either support and resistance, you know, really tightly, or this pre-market high and pre-market low. And the big thing with Amazon that I've learned over time, you know, of course, if you go and look at the contracts, they're expensive already. And especially if I mostly trade weeklies on Amazon. And so, of course, if you're just sitting through that chop, number one, that's really scary for me because I don't like sitting through that because, of course you're sitting there and, it could go either way. So especially with Amazon being expensive, you could get a drop in the contract $2 or $3, pretty fairly quickly. And so I don't like to sit through that chop. So also with Amazon, that decay hits pretty quickly. Monday and Tuesday, I'm not really worried about if I'm swinging something, but especially as you get later on in the week, like Wednesday afternoon, Thursday, and especially if you have ever traded Amazon, you know that those contracts move super fast on Fridays. So pretty much, and on the chart, and I forgot to mention, so I really only trade, I know some people trade with different candle types. I trade with Heikenashis. For me, I like the way that everything is kind of smoothed out, and I like the uniformity of them. So I don't trade with regular candles.
I think a lot of BlackBox members use the Heikenashis.
Yeah.
At least I hear it mentioned pretty often. I
Yeah,
trade with them myself.
And I got mad respect. I know like Maria trades with regular candles. I got mad respect for her. It would drive me crazy. Like, and I know, you can identify a doji or a shooting star, different things like that for trend reversals and stuff. But seeing the way that they're just the appearance of them, it would drive me crazy. Let's see. I'll drag this over from my other screen. I wanted to show you guys. So I had, in addition, and I know this is going to kind of be a little crazy, but it works for me. So in addition to my regular charts, what I have here text scalp strategy. So for anybody who hasn't had a chance to listen to it yet, I'd highly recommend it. Tech Money has, I think it's over in resources. He has a video on a strategy that he made a video about. It's about basically, I think it's when the 9 crosses the team of 50. And so I just like to have that. I have both of them up here on my screen. But over time, to kind of fit in with my trading style, what I've kind of used is I like having these longer term indicators here. So like I'll have my 5, like he had it set up with the regular candle. I have my 5 here with the Heikenashis. And then I have this is where I'll scroll through during the day after the market opens. I'll scroll through because I want to see the bigger pattern here. I'll scroll through the longer time frame. So I'll come over and right now I have it to, let's see, let me choose this chart. I'll come over here and I'll look at either the daily. Let me unmask these so you guys can see what indicators I'm looking at. But here's my stochastic RSI. I like this for scalping during the day. Of course, MACD, TTM squeeze that I'm looking at on my other main chart. And then here, Tech was talking about this, I think it was about a month and a half ago, the Fisher indicator. And so I like to also use this in conjunction with the RSI. I like to see when we're stretched too far, either to the upside or to the downside. And again, that kind of helps me because in my process of deciding whether I'm going to get in a trade, in addition to looking at 34.21, where we are in addition to support and resistance, if I'm going to go short, I'll look on this, I'll look at my RSI, MACD, and Fisher, and I'll see, okay, I'm thinking that the chart setup looks like we're bearish. However, it's possible we might be stretched too far to the downside. We might be in an oversold condition. So that might be something that keeps me out of the trade right then and there because, if we're stretched too far to the downside, sometimes, especially with Amazon, you could get a nice bounce. And so I'll wait. That might give me pause to wait until we bounce up, say, to like the 34 or the 21 to see if we're going to reject off and then continue back down. So that's kind of something that I take a look at as I'm kind of going through the day. I'll always be switching, coming over to this side right here on my chart. I kind of leave these alone here because I want to see where we are on the 5 minute. But I do scroll through, like in this case, I have up the day. I'll come down to the 1 hour and see where we are. So as you can see here, we kind of bounced in the morning. This is the RSI, and we were stretched to the downside on the MACD, and TTM is also squeezing down. And here you also have Fisher looking like we're stretched to the downside as well. So I will watch this price action to see if we're going to continue farther south or if we're going to bounce up here. And this, let's see, the 34 on my chart here is, actually I don't have it on this one. I have the 9. So I would be watching it to bounce up right around to the 1841 area. I need to put the 34 on these. But so that's kind of what I'm scrolling through these to look and see if we're kind of what the broader trend is. Again, because on this main screen that you're looking at here, I'll have up my 1 minute chart to see where we are kind of in that moment. And then I have this these longer terms up on another screen to kind of see where we are. And that kind of helps me know whether it's kind of one thing that I kind of go through as I'm getting into the trade to see if I need to get in, get out, or, you know, just sit it out and wait. And then last but not least, the last chart that I have here is, this is a study in trading view. I know some people look at fib pivots, and I look at those sometimes as well, but what I like to look at as well is the floor trader pivots. And so these in trading view, these are called traditional pivots. And so as you can see here, they have like, these are very far apart. Like you're talking about here, 1828, 1839, 1849, 1860, and so on and so forth. Excuse me. But the reason why I like to look at these is because floor trader pivots, they're not as tight as fib pivots, and they're, of course, a different study. But this kind of gives me an area that, you know, a lot of other people are looking at in terms of areas of support and resistance. And so I just like to have those kind of guardrails, so to speak, when I'm driving on the road. I like to know where we could, it's just kind of another data point of where we could bounce and, you know, where we might see some resistance. Again, if I'm in a trade, I want to know kind of where we might stall out or where we might bounce.
Yeah.
So in terms of my charts, that's everything I'm looking at. So.
Okay, we've got a couple of questions if you want to check those out before we move on to the next section. You want me to read them to you, or do you know how to view it on the control panel?
Please. I have that up here. Thank you.
I'm gonna read you the first.
Yeah, all right, go ahead. Sorry. I can see it here. If we I can't. It won't let me. Okay, here we go. I just click on it. Okay. If we gap down on open, do you jump into a short? If we gap up on open, do you jump into calls at market open? The answer to that is always no. Just because we might gap up or gap down, that doesn't convince me that I need to go short or long, because there's been many times, and I think Tim is, Tim, and especially when I was first trading, when I first started out trading, I remember Tim saying, you know, just because the whole world is bearish doesn't mean, you know, that we're going to continue down. And I've actually seen that, you know, many, many times. You know, you might hear everybody thinking that, hey, we're going to go red, and you look at your chart and, you know, pre-market action is stretched to the downside. And we've had plenty of days where we can go, you know, you hear people in the room say green to red, or, you know, dip and rip. And, you know, people that are going to get burned in that case is, let's say, if we've had a big gap down, and then all of a sudden, you know, we open up and we might get a little bit more of a dip, but then all of a sudden we get a nice move to the upside. Well, whoever went heavy in puts because we got down, they're the ones that's going to be holding the bag, or, you know, holding those, waiting for, or trading on that hopium, hoping that it comes back down. And, you know, especially with Amazon, I've seen days where she'll get pauses during the day, of course, at resistance or support if she's going down. But, you know, if you got into that heavy position in puts because you thought that we were just going to continue that gap, or calls if you thought that we were going to continue to gap up. You could be out of some heavy cash. So I would say the answer to both of those is no. I would simply just, sometimes it's good to sit on your hands. And what I've learned over time is, you may think that you're missing out in the moment, but when you sit on your hands, that helps you save money because you don't end up jumping into that position and then losing as it starts to move against you. But that's definitely a good question.
Keeping money is making money.
There you go. And I would say that, sometimes not doing anything, and that's another great lesson that I've learned in this room. Sometimes not doing anything is the best thing that you can do at that moment. Let's see here. Thank you, Scott. I appreciate it. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, we got a few questions. We got some more come in, so we'll answer that next one from Wesley, and I'll read it to you if that's all right. It says,
sure.
What does your trading plan consist of, and how were you able to identify your trading style?
So, and that's a very good question. So for me, my trading, I'd say trading plan, and trading style. So for me, I like trading, again, a handful of stocks. I keep it whittled down because for me, that is just helps keep me sane. I like to know one or two or three very intimately. Now, lately with Beyond, I've been in the room, that's not necessarily been one that I've watched, traditionally for too long. I didn't watch it since its IPO or anything, but I was just kind of hearing the buzz and thinking that bad boy was just, just overvalued on listening to Fast Money and things like that on valuation. So I just found that as a form of entertainment to watch Beyond and keep that up on my screen to see when she was going to fall. And I did short it. I didn't go too heavy into it because with any of the kind of the trendy things that are going on, we've seen it with Tesla before. You might think everything in the world looks like it's going to fall down and that valuation is too rich, but that's kind of not a reason to short or go heavy into a position. So I was kind of watching the chart and I did short it, and I shorted it this week actually and got out yesterday. So I made a little bit, but the contracts just weren't moving that much. So for me, I kind of going back to your question, Wesley, I would just say that trading plan, I like to trade trends, and I like to trade, of course, off of support and resistance. So I also pay a lot of attention to the flow, coming through on BlackBox. And again, kind of what helps keep me sane when I'm on BlackBox, I have it whittled down to one ticker at a time that I'm watching. And so that's where I'll rely on the room, because the room, might be calling out, hey, take a look at this, or hey, take a look at that. And I know that everyone kind of has their own neighborhood, so to speak, that they reside in. Everybody kind of looks at their own thing. And so if it's something that I normally watch, like here I have Tesla, then that's when my ears will kind of perk up, and I'll let the person know thanks because I appreciate them for calling that out, and then I'll go back over to BlackBox and kind of take a look at the flow and see what it's looking like and see if that's something that I want to take part in. So this is kind of another thing when it's slow, and there, as you can see, we've got a yellow sweep, 222,000 on Tesla on the ask, 160 put for June 14th. So that's something that I would come in, even though it's out a little bit till next month. I would go and take a look at that put and see, kind of what we're looking at there, especially because it's a sweep on the ask. But I primarily just play those trends, and that's kind of worked for me. So I'll be drawing on my chart to kind of get back to your question. I don't mean to ramble, but I will go back to my chart, and during the day, if there's nothing that I'm in at the moment, then I'll go back and I'll draw. I'll just be drawing on my chart. So I'm looking for those patterns. I'm looking for, are we in a bull flag? Are we in a bear flag? Are we in a wedge? Something that we're going to break out of. Are we coming up on VWAP from the upside or downside? And, I'm just looking to see what that price action is doing how the volume is looking, and that is what's going to determine if I get into a long or short. And over time, I've learned to look at those longer trend, the longer trends, because on the 1 minute, it may look like we're going to pop, or it may look like we're going to, break down through something. But on that longer trend, it could be kind of contradicting, like on the 5 or the 15 minute. And so that may keep me out of that trade right then, because again, it might look like we're about to stall out. And so if you've got the longer trend, it's kind of hard to explain, but if you've got the longer trend and the 1 minute kind of going against each other, that can just mean that we might chop around for a little while until they kind of work each other out, until it looks more favorable. So again, because I'm trading Amazon, I want to be cognizant of that, because I don't want to be sitting there through the chop, especially because the how much the contracts cost. So Wesley, and so it took me a while when I first started trading. It took me, I want to say, a couple of months to really kind of get in the groove and really get comfortable with trading those trends. But I just like to trade trends and chart patterns. And then of course, when I've got flow that's backing that up, and when I've got, the longer trend backing that up, then it kind of makes me more comfortable in what I'm the position that I'm in at that time.
Cool. So you say the technical chart patterns, you like the bull flag. What else? What other two? Like let's hear your top three.
So of course, bull and bear flags. Then of course, cup and handle is always good, because again, you're looking for that continuation. I also like trend breaks. So let me go out here to the longer, like Tesla's a classic one. So I'll pull up Tesla here real quick, and I'll show you guys one that I played and did very well on. Of course, like once I just saw this chart with Tesla, a double top, I love looking at those, and of course, double bottom. So like right here, this would be a classic case. You're seeing up here around this 199.60 area, and of course, we've got a level of resistance up there of 200 being a whole number. So I would be watching up there to see if we could break above that, or if we're going to fail to either get long or short. But let me go back. This is going to be a little bit farther back, when I'll show you a nice chart pattern and how I was able to trade off of it.
Yeah, that was a good looking setup. A double top forming under the 200 mark. Wow.
Yeah. So I would definitely, like right now, be watching Tesla to see. And as you can see here, I've drawn out my channel. And so this wasn't the one I was going to show, but it kind of made me think about it once I pulled this up. As you can see here, as we've gone through this channel, it's been bounced up and down, up and down. And so as we've hit both of those areas of support or resistance on that trend, to me, once we get, I'm looking like, let's just say right here around 323.67. So I'm looking at that high. And of course, I wouldn't have known that right away, because these pivots don't populate until you get about 7 candles to the right. And so anyway, I'm looking here. Once I've got my kind of upper and lower supports on my price channel drawn, then this would be a good area for me to take a low risk short. And on the other side, once we get stretched as we get closer to the to the lower support in the channel, that'd be an area for me to take a lower risk long. And of course, I'm looking at the TTM and where we're stretched to the upside or downside in conjunction with that. And of course, how we're looking down here on the MACD. But I need to go back a little bit farther. Let me see here. Because just to show you this real quick. Let's scroll out here. All right, for the delay. I'm gonna go back just a little bit here. maybe, let me go to the 1 hour. There was an ascending wedge pattern I wanted to show you because we started to get, and it might take me a minute to find it. I should have had it pulled up before, but I might just move past. But we were getting to a point where we were, the price action was ascending. We were making kind of lower highs, and we started to get to a point where it looked like we were very stretched to the upside. And I took a short on it, and I think that was on a Friday. I went out to the following, it's been one of my best Tesla trades. I just bought a week out, and so that one Friday I bought a contract for it was like $1.02 or $1.05, somewhere in there, and I sold it. I should have held it all the way through the following Friday, but I didn't, just because she would have done really well, but I think I ended up selling it for like right around, she topped out around like 14 or 14 and a half, somewhere in there, but I think where I sold it at like 10 and some change. So it went from like 102, 105 to like a little over 10 and some change. So it actually, those chart patterns for me really work out well, and that's just been something that I've always been able to feel more comfortable working on.
It was a great trade, man.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Thank you. All right, I can't see. Let's see here. I was just scrolling down on my side. I don't know if you see any more. Did you see any more questions?
No, I think that's it for now. White, there one just popped up. Oh, that was somebody saying thank you. So it was Wesley.
Cool.
So let's move on to the next section. Where you want to take us? You want to talk about
right.
you want to talk about some flow, or you want to talk about some of the tools on BlackBox, or?
Cool. Yeah. Let me pull over. Let's see here. Let me pull this back over. So again, for me, primarily, I'm watching just one to a handful of tickers. I'm not necessarily, I can't, and I've tried, but I can't kind of manage multiple tickers, all at one time. So like I said, I'm staring at Amazon. If Amazon is kind of in a rut, then I will move on. And so right here, like I just have Tesla up here, and Tesla just happens to be one that's moving nicely this morning. So I would definitely be watching the flow. And this is where, for me, I really rely on the room, because of course I do watch BlackBox during the day, but the room is awesome because they'll come out and say, hey, we've got XYZ on Tesla, or we've got XYZ on Amazon. And again, when it's something that I'm watching, I really pay attention to those. So like for right here, we had that one that came in at $222,000 on the ass sweep. So that would have that'd be something that catches my eye. You have a little bit of time, and she's in yellow. So for me, and Tim knows this, and the room knows this, I don't trust no whites. Some people trust the whites, but I don't mess with it. In my time, when I've tried to play a white flow, it's maybe worked out maybe one or two times, and that's just it has nothing to do with the flow. I just kind of look at the white as that's kind of a indicator that something could be coming up. It's kind of the beginning of a pattern, but I don't necessarily if I'm going to trade off flow, especially for a longer term play, then I don't necessarily trust the whites at all. And I don't trust, like up here where we see this, where we see this block, even though it's $1 million. One thing that I learned from Tim and Maria and the rest of the folks in the room is I don't necessarily pay attention to the blocks because sometimes you don't see the price action really react to it that much. So I just kind of keep them in mind. Same thing with the whites. I keep them in mind, but I don't trust them at all. So I will pay attention to when you start to see flow, that kind of goes into this magenta color, especially when we're talking about on the ask and above ask sweeps, then that's what I'm looking at. And I'm also, paying attention to the amount of value of the trade. The higher, obviously, the better. But that white flow is something that I just don't mess with. So again, here, if I'm going to play this out longer term, then this is going to be something that I watch. It's going to be this one right here. That's pretty intriguing to me. That $222,000 sweep on Tesla. And just to kind of check on Tesla, let's see here real quick. Sorry, I was just kind of intrigued on how she's looking because we pointed out that double top. So I wanted to see how she was looking back down here, if she's how she's looking in the pattern. But yeah, that flow is definitely valuable. It's something that I watch throughout the day. If again, if Amazon is stalled out, or if I'm just kind of in between trades, then I'm looking to see what that flow, how it looks. And so we kind of talked about chart patterns. So if I was just trading here, this would have been for me. This would have been an area that I would have taken a low risk short, because as you can see here in pre-market, she failed up here at 199.60, which was very close to that area of resistance. And so this double top up here, without hopping in right at the very beginning, I wouldn't have got conviction to automatically short Tesla, also given the nature of Tesla. But this up here, once we have gotten kind of up around this area, I'm looking for a short. I wouldn't be looking to go long. Wouldn't necessarily have pressed the button right away. I would have given it a couple of candles, but this would be an excellent short opportunity to see if we're going to follow a double top scenario, and especially given the bearish sentiment on Tesla. Wouldn't be a heavy position that I would go into up here, because again, with Tesla, you can easily reverse. But I would be looking at taking a short position here. The only caveat to this, and I do get asked this question in DM sometimes because we're calling out the 34 and the other moving averages, is just what I'll be watching for is to see, okay, this 21, sometimes you can get a nice bump around the 21. And especially I'm also looking at the 34. And so on the downside, if I'm in a short, I'm looking at the 21, the 34, and VWAP, in addition to areas of support and resistance, as potential exit points or potential areas that I just need to be concerned about, because that might be where the price action could start moving against me. So that's kind of how I look at those moving averages while I'm actually in an actual trade itself.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. I was going to ask you what you were looking for after you were in this trade. What are you looking for in terms of your exit? So
cool. Yeah. So, and let me let's see here, and that's actually a good. Let's see here. Let me bring this up. So this is my main chart. Again, I know it looks a little busy, but it works for me. So what I keep up here is I'll have Tesla or whatever I'm trading in the middle. I usually have here to the right-hand side, I'll have the tick. And I always, people may look at different things. So people may look at NASDAQ tick or NYSE tick. For me, I like looking at NASDAQ just to kind of, because I live in the tech world with Amazon and some of the others that I mess with. So I watch the tick. And then over here, I like to keep up UVXY. So I was just kind of looking at several different things this morning, and that's the reason why I didn't have it kind of all pre-populated. But as we know with different things, UVXY will move kind of contrary to your price. So, of course, I look at that kind of as a leading indicator. If UVXY obviously is ticking down, then that might put some more wind in my sails if I'm in a long. Conversely, if UVXY is ticking up, then I need to be cautious if I'm in a long, or happy if I'm in a short. So I will watch. I have UVXY right up next to any price action or anything that I'm watching. And of course, then, the tick, because it gives you an idea of if we're in a positive trending market, of course, or if we're in a negative trending market. So I put me just a line up here at 0, and I would like to see. I watch the tick during the day to kind of see where we're at in terms of overall market breadth.
Okay.
So how that affects my trading, like here again, so double top looks good in terms of the pattern. If I was going to be in Tesla, kind of walking through things that I'm looking at, kind of that I'm scrolling in my mind through pretty quickly, is I'm looking to see, okay, if I'm in a short here, we did bounce down to the 21, but right here, we're right back up on this area, this 197.50 area of resistance. And this is kind of, for people who are starting out, it's very important that you just sit on your hands for a little while. I would recommend either starting off with paper trading, or if you're really feeling that urge to just hop into things, sit back and really get to know your ticker and watch that price action. Because sometimes people will, immediately start off trading and not really understand that ticker, and that's how you can quickly blow up an account. So
yeah, go ahead.
I was just
Sorry.
going to say, no, you're fine. Sorry, there's just a little bit of lag, and it might be GoToWebinar, so I don't mean to talk over you.
I was just going to say that, yeah, just for newbies, people that are new, I mean, probably, Tesla is probably not the best thing to start out with. I'd wait till you got a couple of trades and, few weeks or maybe months of experience. Personally, that's what I would recommend. And, you want to start out with something, I always suggest Apple or Facebook as go-tos to kind of, get your initial first options trade with. And what do you think? What's your comments on that as far as suggesting, some tickers where you would, think that they're probably I wouldn't say easier, but a little bit more kind of, well, maybe it is easier to. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. I was just going to say, I agree with you 100%. And I would say like little easier and slower moving. I would say I would go for like, I think you brought up a good one. Apple is really good. I started off with Apple, just kind of watching it before I kind of got addicted to Amazon. Another one that I remember a lot of people talking about when I first started off with that they were watching, as especially for longer plays, was Visa. Now I haven't looked at Visa in a while, so that's kind of the disclaimer there. But I know when I first started, I did get some good long plays, especially off in the room. Geo, he's the guy in the room, and he kills it on like Visa, MasterCard, and I think there for a while. I don't know if he still plays it, but I think he was playing GDOT. And so those were three, and I would really, I remember when I first started off, people were saying Visa was a good one. And so I would watch Visa, and, especially that one was one that on some longer term time frames was a little easier. And, another thing, DMAC, I was going to say is if you're just starting out, and I think this is good on any ticker, don't play weeklies. Buy yourself some time. That way you can have a little bit less data burn, and you can buy yourself a little bit more time to kind of play with. But definitely, if you're new, don't touch Amazon and do not touch Tesla, because Tesla took a lot of money from me. I thought that I could play her at the beginning. After I kind of sat on my hands for several weeks, I thought I was feeling pretty good and had my chest all poked out, and Tesla humbled me real quick. So take it easy and don't, my advice would be paper trade if you're just starting out. Go with something like an Apple or Visa, which are kind of a little slower moving, and the price doesn't fluctuate as rapidly as Tesla or Amazon. And buy yourself some more time, so that way you're not having to contend with theta burn, because you're not going to be experienced with getting in and out of them rather quickly.
Great advice, man.
Thank you. And as we're sitting here talking, I was looking at Tesla, and so just to kind of walk through what I would be doing if I was in a short here, which again, I would have shorted up here off this double top. I'm always drawing these trends. So I'd be drawing my upper trend as resistance here. And then as I'm sitting here, kind of watching how things play out, I'm also drawing my lower support on my trend here. And the reason why that's important to me is because I want to see kind of how we're consolidating. Now, of course, as we know, this pattern right here can play out one of two ways. You can see this as a double top, and then of course we can go down and ultimately break this low right here and continue the pattern on, and then of course you're good if you're in a short. But then also what can happen is that if you shorted here or right up here where we started to stall out, then of course you're seeing I would have been holding through this to see, okay, knowing that the 21 could act as support. But then of course you've got this, I knew from watching this several days ago that this 197.50 was a really hard area for us to break over multiple days. So that we bounced off of that support several times. So if I'm in this short right now, what I'm watching is I would have watched to see, okay, I would have probably got a little nervous when I got down here to the 21 and I saw this bounce. This would have been probably about 198 or 198 to say 198.50 would have been my stop, because sometimes Tesla can bounce around a little bit. But I'm glad that we failed ultimately right here, because again, that was strong support over several days, and you wouldn't necessarily get that if you hadn't just sat there and watched your ticker. So that's what I mean by like watching your ticker and really get to know like how it behaves. Good thing we failed up here at resistance. Obviously, I would have been, the next area that I would have been looking at on the way down for an area of support would have been this 34 right here, my yellow line. And going through that 34 to the downside would have given me confidence to stay in the short. And then, of course, the next area that I'm watching is the bottom side of my trend to see if we bounce there and continue that pattern. Or, once we fell through that, then I'm watching this area of support down here that I've drawn on my chart, this 193.40 that we bounced off of. So that's another area that I would have been watching to stay in my short. So if I had multiple contracts, then right here is an area on this area of support that I would have unloaded at least. If I hadn't sold any already, then I would have at least cut it down by a third, either a third to a half. And then I would either be holding either the half of my position or a third of the position that I had left over, just depending upon volume and price action. That determines upon how much I would cut, to see if we're going to either go through and continue the pattern, or the area for the bounce that I'm watching, I'm going to watch and see if we reject off of this 34 up here, and I might give it a few cents to play with. But if we go through this 34 with some nice volume, then I'm going to cut the remainder of my position and take the rest of those profits. I'm not going to wait on it to bounce any farther than that 34. And I'm just looking over here to see if we have any more questions. All right, and I don't see that we have any more right now. So that's kind of an overview of kind of what's going through my mind in an actual trade. The first thing that I'm looking for, like I said, I'm looking for the chart pattern and the setup. I'm looking for a trend break. So what I mean by a trend break is actually drawing if I'm going to the upside like here, I would actually, draw my line from the bottom, try to identify the trend and see when we broke it to either go short or long. and then I'm looking for that break to either the upside or the downside. But here, this would have been a great double top pattern to short off of this morning.
Yeah, I
agree. And then, of course, on the upside or the downside, I'm looking for those MAs to give me areas of support and resistance, just based on, for moving up from the bottom or from the top. Real quick, I was just going to say, I'm sorry,
go ahead.
Real quick, I was going to say another area to watch here, and I get this question from time to time, is VWAP. That stands for Volume Weighted Average Price. If you haven't done so already, again, for the newer folks, and I mean, even for me, there's times that I'll hear something that I haven't heard before, or somebody's talking about something that I necessarily, that might be new to me. I strongly suggest the sites like Investopedia. So a lot of folks will ask about VWAP, and again, it stands for Volume Weighted Average Price. And so to know like kind of what goes into the calculations, I suggest you go over to Investopedia and kind of check that out. Or, again, we have some great resources in the room. But that's another area that you can look at, just put it up on your chart. And sometimes you'll get a lot of either support or resistance based on how we're moving during the day. So it's really nice to kind of have that kind of as another, just another indicator on your chart to take a look and see how we're moving around that area. Because there have been a lot of times, like right now, how we're looking right here on Tesla, where we will close in on either an area of support or resistance, or if this line wasn't here and this wasn't an area for Tesla, closing in on VWAP. And that's also another area in this case that you can make a decision on your short, or, of course, if you're approaching from the upside, you can make a decision on your long to either, trim your position, or let it ride, just based on how you're interacting around VWAP. Because sometimes what you'll get is you'll get either a bounce off of VWAP, you'll start to see that volume come in, or, it's like butter. It can fall right through. And then, of course, if you're in your shorts, then you're good to go. And you can see that continuation. Let's see here. I'll move over to Amazon. I know we've looked at Tesla mostly this morning. So let's see here. So Amazon, yeah, let me draw. The first thing, again, what I like to do is let me draw my lines. I'm just waiting on the trading view.
So everyone
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, bud.
No, I was just going to say that normally I don't get these delays, so it might be GoToWebinar.
Yeah, it may be. That's fine. I'll go ahead and talk for a minute while you're setting that up. Just watching the Kang, we're gonna listen to how he looks at Amazon. Like you said, 85% of the time, this is what he's looking at. This is what he's trading. Just listening to him while I'm working in the office here at BlackBoxStocks, I just think that he does a really incredible job at having a plan, being patient, calm, and collective, and looking for the setups. And like he said, you don't have to trade every day. If he doesn't see it, he doesn't see it. He's there watching, and he's ready to go. When he does see it, he's ready to get it. And I think that's an incredible skill for a trader to develop, is being able to have that patience and that kind of self-control. So my hat goes off to you, man. So go ahead, take us through Amazon. Let us see what you're looking at, and then we'll wrap up the webinar.
Cool. And I appreciate it, D-Mac. And I was just going to say real quick, before I get into Amazon again, I got to give some credit to Tim on that one. I remember one of the hardest things when I first started out in doing was trying, and I still work on it every single day, but I know like I'm gotten a lot better at it now. But one of the most difficult things to do was just have that patience. And I remember Tim telling the story about, you kind of have like when people are new or when they first start out, wanting to catch all of the moves. And you don't necessarily have to do that. It's like, if you think about fishing, you bait your hook, you throw your line out, and you wait. And, you might have one that bites on your hook and it gets away. But if you focus on the one that got away and you dwell on that, that's going to mess your head up, to really focus on the next one that could come along. And I've learned that that's a really important thing in trading. It's very mental. And so you don't want to be in a bad mindset when you're trying to sit there. And again, you don't want to be in a position where you're trying to, okay, I'm going to make up for it on the next one. Because guess what? You could kind of be in a bad headspace, and then you're not, your head's kind of, your judgment's clouded. You're not making the right decision based off your chart. And then you're just trying to, get that next trade in. And so, sometimes you might just need to take a break or whatever and kind of come back to it. Because again, the idea here is to continue to appreciate your account, meaning that you want your dollars to increase. And so the way to do that is to kind of have yourself in a good mindset and, really focus on your chart. Because if you don't, and you're constantly chasing after, hey, I need to make this right. I need to, change this up. I need to, get better, or I need to, fix what I messed up on earlier. Then, you're constantly going to kind of be chasing your tail. And so watching Amazon, kind of going back to the chart here. So I would not have traded this yet, even though we had that big move down, say from 1844 to 26-ish. I wouldn't have traded that yet, just because the price action really wasn't convincing me. I mean, yes, she did. You saw here how we tried to make the move up above with that 1840.50 resistance in the morning. Also here, we were bouncing up and kind of riding the 34. And yes, we did fall to the downside. I would have really just sat through most of this because, again, kind of going back to the sentiment thing that we talked about today, we've had so much of a sell-off in certain areas over the last, few days. We have bounced around, like on the Dow. We bounced around. We got some, I think we were up yesterday, if I remember correctly. But some areas we were looking oversold also. And so that when we get into some oversold conditions, I'm a little bit more leery about going short. And so, just kind of going back to the chart, that's when I'm relying upon my trend breaks or my trends here. So again, just kind of drawing this line, my lines down, just to kind of see the pattern this morning. Right here, we're kind of at an interesting area where we've bounced off of the pre-market low. We've made it above the 21. We've made it above the 34. I'm not seeing a lot of the volume that I'd like to see to think that we're going to have a reversal. However, we are holding. So we've made it above the 34. We've broke this trend. So right here, I'd be inclined to take a small long position in Amazon. Because right here, as you can see, we're starting to break above this resistance, which is right here about 1832.5. And this is what I mean by, as we talked about earlier, looking at VWAP, which is up here. That's that orange line around 1833.60. So I would keep this very tight. And of course, if we continue to move up, then, I would ride it up until to see how we're going to react around this strong resistance up here, 1840.5. But if we cannot make it above VWAP, or if we start to stall, then if I've got multiple contracts, I'm going to start to trim these off and limit my risk. Maybe let a couple or a few ride. But I'm going to be definitely watching this VWAP and kind of right here where we have this resistance. It's kind of an area of compression to be really focused on managing that trade to look for a reversal, because again, VWAP can be one of those areas that, even though you may not be an area around an area of support or resistance, VWAP is an area that your price action can turn. So that would be an area that I would be watching at if I was in this long position for continuation.
Okay. Do you have anything else you want to tell us about Amazon before we see if everyone has some questions before we wrap up the webinar?
Oh, let me see here. I'm trying to go back through. I mean, Amazon is one that I like it just because of the range. But again, we've kind of had some days where you don't really get it. Like today, I wouldn't really call this anything spectacular. Over here, TradingView is calculating this 28 off of the pre-market high, but I wouldn't really, for me, this price action today doesn't look spectacular. So this will be a day where I would be, in addition to kind of watching Amazon over here in this pain to see kind of where we're bouncing around, I would be going to look at Tesla, or I'd be looking at Apple, Tesla, or I might even go over and look at Beyond to see how she's looking. But Amazon, I mean, she's known, a lot of people like it because we've had days where you might get a $40, $50, $60 move, especially if you get some good news. And those contracts can move very quickly. But again, that can be a double-edged sword because again, if the price action moves against you all, then your IV can start to drain if it's moving against you, or the price of the contracts can go south pretty quick as well. So again, this would not be one that I would recommend anyone who is starting out. Definitely watch it if you'd like. Have it up on your screen just to kind of have something that you might want to look at some point. But I would not jump headfirst into Amazon. But she's I don't know. I love her. I fell in love with her after a few months, and after I felt like I had my feet under me with Apple and then Visa, I moved over and kind of applied those same concepts to Amazon. And like I said, the disclaimer that I would have: watch it for a couple of weeks, sit on your hand. And I know that might be a little hard, but I would just sit on your hands and watch it and really get to know the ticker.
Great advice, man. That's really what it's all about, getting to know a few tickers really well. And that's a good part of the program, especially for newbies, is to learn how to watch a stock and so start to identify things and, develop good habits and instinctive intuition. You got to constantly be developing and getting better. So it's really good advice, man. So let's move on. We got a question from Alum. And he is asking, with Amazon, do you trade ITM or OTM, and what delta do you usually use?
So that's a really great question. So I don't necessarily, I would say, just kind of back up because I was kind of thinking down the road there. I would say that there's not necessarily a set strategy that I have as far as in the money versus out of the money. It all depends on the chart. It all depends on the move. It all depends on sentiment. Like, case in point, if let's say that, pre-market, we had some really positive news on the trade front, then that would be a day that, based on the chart setup. Now, I wouldn't go into the day thinking, okay, I'm just going to play some far out of the money calls, and that's what I'm going to sit in. Because again, the chart is going to tell you. But if, let's just say, if conditions are favorable and it's some really good news, then I would be looking to be a little bit more liberal with how far out of the money that I would go. And again, it all depends on the sentiment. It all depends on the news. I might go $10 out of the money. If it's a really good day, I might start off with going that far out of the money. And if we've hit the target, then, as I'm cutting on the way up and scaling out of the position, if we have some continuation, then I, might continue to go farther out. And I think it's the farthest I've ever went out on Amazon on a weekly has been about $50 out of the money one time. I think I played like up to the next, I think we were in the 1800s one time. And again, the longer term chart, I looked out at the daily, we were closer on into the week. So I think it was either a Monday or Tuesday, if I remember correctly. So I still had some time in the week. And I went out farther and did okay. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend that on for an actual strategy. I would say if you're going to play Amazon and, you feel comfortable with it once you get to that level, then I would say, to either play closer to the money. I wouldn't go personally. I don't like going too far in the money. I know that they decay at a slower, and you get a better delta, but I don't like playing too far in the money. I will either play at the money, or as a standard rule of thumb, $5 to $10 out of the money based on the chart. But I don't go too far into the money.
We have any more questions from anyone else before we wrap up today? All right, I guess that's it. So that's going to conclude our Meet the Mods with ThuyKang. ThuyKang, I want to really, man, thank you so much. It's been really, really interesting and, just very informative on hearing, your play-by-play, setup that you look at, your technicals, your routine. So we appreciate you sharing that information. Everybody, ThuyKang is in the Discord chat room with us every day. So if you got any other questions, you can hit him up later on today. And we're going to conclude. So we'll see you guys in the room, and we're looking for the next trade. So stay green, everybody, and have a great day, okay?
Stay green. Thank you. Thank you very much. And like I said, thanks, DMAC. And if you guys need anything, just like DMAC said, just, I'm always in the Discord room. You're not a bother at all. Hit me up anytime, and, I can answer anything or kind of walk through anything that you might have.
All right, buddy. Sounds good. So you still got the controls. I'm going to let you take it off the recording setting, and we'll wrap today.